These are the songs of our lives. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Songs of Our Lives. I'm Brad Rose. I am an artist, a composer, a writer, the founder of Foxy Digitalis, somebody who thinks about music and sound far more than is healthy. Each week I invite on a guest to talk about the music and the songs that have meant a lot to them and left its mark. Previous guests include David Grubbs, Ann Butters, Seth Parker Woods, Tashi Wada, Joe Rainey, Lulu York, Miriam Gindren, so many more. This week, it took a year, but literally the second person I ever asked to be on this show is my guest this week, the one, the only, Maurice. I love Maurice. I love her music. I think she's just amazing. I think I've made that pretty clear over the last few years. First interview I did when Foxy Digitalis came back after 10-year hiatus, or was it 10, 8, whatever it was. Anyway, Mari was the first interview I did. So yeah, I knew she would be so good at this. And whenever I reached out to initially ask her, she was in the process of moving to New York and a lot was going on. Timing couldn't have been worse, but hey, a year later, it was all worth it. So, she's got 2 new albums out. One is her project with Seth Graham. Night of Fire is on Orange Milk. It's out now. It's a hell of a record. Both those records that her and Seth have made, dang. And this one also has Recovery Girl is, I guess, part of the band now. And there is no pronunciation of the band, as we talked about. There's no music like this. And then her new solo album, Lacuna and Parlor, is out on September 20th on Mondage, the killer. Like one of the best labels one of the best labels on the planet. They're out of Poland. And it's kind of a Maurice album unlike any other Maurice album. Like everything I love about Maurice is there, but she does so much more and kind of takes a lot of the sort of the sound worlds and ideas and like the emotional core of her music and presents it in forms I've never heard. It's amazing. So, like I said, it took a year. It was worth the wait. This was everything I hoped it would be and more. So, if y'all don't enjoy this, I don't know what's wrong with you. My guest today is a musician, a composer, someone who should be like the first name on everyone's call sheet because I think there's nothing you can't do. It's my favorite. It's your favorite. It's everybody's favorite. It is Mari Maurice. Yay!
Yay!
How's it going?
Oh, it's going fine.
So, as ever, as always, you're very busy.
Yep. I feel like I'm always just like, yeah, it's gonna calm down like at this time, and then like a million other things inevitably happen at the time I think it's supposed to calm down. So yeah,
that's but that's all right.
Constant struggle.
Yeah, right. I feel that so much. You have 2 records coming out within the space of like 3 weeks.
Yep.
So that feels even intense for you.
Yeah, I thought they would be more spaced out, and it just kind of timing wise happened to be like kind of neck and neck with things.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are obviously trying to get things out before the election too.
Right.
And so I think that it's like there's a lot of that going on.
That makes a lot of sense.
Let's try to get it out because we don't know what's going to happen in this election cycle. Yeah, it's like the election cycle's already been crazy. We got an assassination attempt. Like Biden dropped out, which I never thought was going to happen.
Oh, God,
and so like it's been, yeah, I was just like, you know what, like probably the earlier the better.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Well, I guess let's go in chronological order. So,
Okay.
And talk about the record with Seth, which I have no idea how to refer to the project name.
You simply can't.
Yeah.
It cannot be pronounced. Seth would say the same thing. People have tried to come up with all these elaborate readings of that name. There's been like thought it was like an EKG reading. Someone else
Oh,
thought it was
wow.
like a phrase in Morse code. And it's just literally a set of characters that Seth thought looked cool that we went with. And he was like, "How about this for band name?" And I was like, "Yeah, man, that sounds great." And so, yeah. Yeah, so that record is a pretty intense record. I made it a lot like about I mean, Seth, we worked kind of differently on this one as opposed to the last one. The last one, there's a lot of back and forth of sometimes me starting tracks like completely raw, and then Seth kind of like gradually tearing them apart, and then I would come back to it and like maybe add a few more things, and then it would start to like kind of come together in the form it was. With this one, it was more, we only did that on a couple of tracks. And for this one, for the most part, a lot of it were electronic pieces that I kind of let Seth just run with. And then he would send it to me and I would like make a few edits and then write vocal and string parts to the songs. So it was a much more streamlined process of kind of like, okay, here's this thing that Seth like would just kind of like work until he had it really meticulously how he wanted it. And then I would go in and add like vocals and strings. And I wanted the strings to be like a really big focal point on a lot of the songs too. So that it kind of feels like there's not so much a like juxtaposition of like the noise and like the more acoustic arrangements. It's like all pretty congealed. Like on the title track, I literally learned all of these VST. Like I learned how to play all these VST things Seth was doing in Ableton that were like these weird kind of digital emulations of like violin that sounded super synthetic. And so I just learned them and played them and then like wrote a like 12 tone row that kind of like goes throughout the whole song. So it was like a much different approach for the whole thing. But I mean, to me, like I feel like it was a pretty intense record to make because a lot of it was about like the circumstances of me leaving Texas and both in terms of like really going through like a pretty awful and traumatic like personal experience, and then on top of that also just like literally being in like 110-degree heat for months at a time, and sort of like those two things going in conjunction. And some of it I started writing like around the time all of these things were happening, and then I didn't really finish like the lyrics and my contributions to the record until I was pretty settled in New York, because I like really needed to have some like distance and processing for everything before I was able to really sit down and like actually sing about and like write about a lot of the things. And there are like there's even a song on there that we were planning on playing live, and I was like, Seth, I can't emotionally sing this song every night. It's too intense and it's too personal. So it's that one's definitely a doozy in terms of everything. And it's interesting too. I think like the last record, a lot of that was Seth processing a pretty like traumatic event that happened with his brother. And then sort of a lot of what I was writing was more around like the general themes that he was presenting to me with what he was trying to do with the music. And I feel like the situations kind of switched in this case, where it was like much more like I was like, this is sort of like my processing like record in a big way. I
hope your third record, you guys, neither one of you will have to have
like a horrible life altering event to sing about or compose around. Yeah, that would be really great. I would love for us to make a record. I mean, technically we did this like single, and I feel like that was like it's definitely the happiest music Seth and I have made together. Because it like was a reissue of a song that I sang on of Seth's years ago, about our that's like kind of about our dogs. And then there's like more of this kind of breezy thing we did for a like podcast series that Holly Waxwing was hosting for a while. And it's like this sort of like 3-part suite, and I feel like that's pretty genuinely happy music. I think both of us were in a pretty good place. We'd like, yeah, but then it's like two years went by and started work on another record, and then it was like, yikes.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It's it's really good. It's really hard to listen to at times. Like, and I mean that in a very good way. Like,
no, I understand. There's a reason it's like only right at a half hour, because both of us were like, I think if this is any longer, people are just going to be like, whoa, man, I can't handle this.
Well, and I was thinking about this yesterday, and this is like very, inside baseball crap, but like, so I'm doing this premiere of the song you got with the one with Diana.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh shit, I gotta like listen to this a bunch to write about this.
Yeah.
That's gonna be I have a couple weeks, so I'm gonna take my time. But
one of the things that was different about this too, and I feel like you saying that actually really makes me think of like kind of realize why this happened, was like obviously it was a very emotional record to make. I would say probably the most like intensely, like, I know everyone always is like the most personal record today, but this is definitely by far the most personal thing I have ever done. It feels very intense. I've never made a record where I'm like, I can't sing some of these songs live because I will like have a breakdown. And so, as we finished it, normally I'm usually the one who mixes everything too. And in this case, we passed it off to Andrew Weathers, which was like a first, because part of it was just like simply a timing issue, about like, just not really having a ton of time to like sit down and really mix it. And then the other part of it was I was like, like, I don't need to be listening to this every day. Like, this is a pretty intense record for me on an emotional level, and also on a sonic level. It's like quite difficult listening. And so it's like, I was like, you know what, this is a great project for Andrew. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, on to, I don't say better things. I don't know, brighter things. I don't know. So you also got your new solo record coming out on Mongoy, which is out on September 20th. And it's hard. I kind of can't believe this, but this is like my favorite Maurice record.
Thanks. It's so good. Thank you so much. It is also my favorite. I feel like, I mean, I obviously have like a background in like composition and studied it, and like wrote a lot of pieces when I was like in college and grad school. And it's always been sort of a part of my work. But I think, there's so much to be said about the circumstances and like logistics of like the kind of music you make when you live in a place. And I think I had kind of abandoned a lot of these threads because there just weren't a lot of like performers or venues where it would be easy to present music like this in Texas, especially in Austin. Austin is a very like rock club minded city. I've like had many venting sessions with so many friends about this, about how it's just very difficult, honestly, to like be able to like kind of pull off anything that doesn't meet like a like standard rock band, like 3 or 4 piece standard. And so when I moved to New York, I just started realizing like how much I had missed that music and how like foundational so much of that has been to me. Because it's like, I mean, I would kind of say in a way, I would like minimalism might be like my favorite, kind of just like everything from like 70s to like 90s. It's probably like my favorite like overall genre of all time. like in terms of just things that like deeply move and inspire me. It kind of doesn't get better than that. And just sort of realizing that I was able to like really get back into that, and that I could actually write and perform these pieces with people who wanted to do it, who like knew where I was coming from and were excited at the prospect of doing that was really inspiring. And then also hearing some more kind of contemporary things that are like kind of like going in that way too. This record that CPM released last year was definitely like a really big kind of impetus for a lot of things, because I was just like, holy shit, like I'm already like on this kind of track with like what I want to write and what I want to do. And then I was like, and there are other people who seem to be really interested in this very kind of specific arc. And I mean, obviously like Ellen Arcbro and people like that as well.
Right.
And so, yeah, this record, I like something I had started to do when I was at Cal Arts. That was sort of a thread I picked back up on. I taught like a lot of theory classes, like music theory classes. And I became really interested in just like things being really durational, but really simple. And kind of like just really playing with like these very, sort of rote expectations of like how tonal music theory works in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of the pieces on this record kind of like pick that thread back up of having like a really loose score or idea, and then basically just kind of like stretching out really simple harmonic material in many cases, or like following this process through and just kind of letting things like drift through the process. And so that was how a lot of this got to be written. Like literally, I think 10 years ago, I wrote a piece called A Cadence, which was a solo violin piece that's on Accidental Prizes. There's a recording of it that I actually don't like that recording of it, because I added this other stuff to it. And I was like, man, I shouldn't have done that. But like at the time, it seemed fun. But initially, it was just for solo violin. And it was just literally like a 1-5-1, but with like a lot of the notes deleted, that I would play sometimes live for like 30 minutes, like, which is just an insane thing to do on a really, like, because it's all barred double stops on the violin. So it's like your hand is just like kind of barring the whole time. And one time I like played it for literally a half hour at a concert, and like I could not move my hand out of that shape afterwards. And it's like a really like tiny like bow motion the whole time too. And so but I had really missed doing pieces like that. And it's like I performed Cone by James Tinney many years ago, and I feel like that was like a kind of like revelation for me. Like that and Plain Fortress by Oliver Pert. I feel like those two things were like pieces where I was just like, oh, holy shit, like I want to write like violin music that I can play like this. And so yeah, it was really great to like working on that record. I feel like has completely like reinvigorated a lot of like ideas I've had, and
awesome.
It feels like kind of the most honest like portrayal of like what I'm interested in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also just like so nice to like be able to like write and record with other people and like have a quote unquote band of sorts. Like that was something I hadn't experienced for like more eaze or for my own music in literally years. It was like every now, like when Maurice first started, Claire and some other people would play with me like as a band, but it was pretty short lived. People moved away. Claire was in San Antonio, which was not always the most convenient thing at the time. And also she was like drumming with like, I mean, more people than like I've ever played with in my life. Yeah, exactly. And so I think that like it has felt really good to like be in a position where I'm like, I can have people kind of come in and out and play this music. And also just like, it's like literally a dream. Like I've always been like in love with the idea of like the Michael Nyman band, for example, or like, these composers who are just like kind of approaching things with the mentality where it's like their composed pieces are sort of like, conceptual pieces that have like an idea that they're following through, but the idea of it being like a band as opposed to like, this like chamber group or like having other people kind of like licensed out to play it feels really good. I really love it. And it was like, just great to work on it. And it felt like really kind of like unearthing this like forgotten part of myself in a big way. And like also just kind of going through and getting to like have the experience too of realizing that I could also like overdub myself and like make this music in like a specific way too was something I hadn't really tried as well. And so that's sort of like where the title comes from a bit too, is it's like I feel like kind of the back half of the record are pieces that are like largely like following like one simple like harmonic idea for like a really long period of time, but it's just me sort of overdubbing everything in the room and like recording the room sound while also carrying out this process. And then sort of the first half is more like the pieces for the ensemble, and so it's kind of like this switch of like this sort of like void that's like me and like several ghosts of myself, and then like an actual like community of people.
Yeah, no, I was one of your band members, so I recorded one of these with Nick Zonka like last week.
Yeah, Nick's great. Yeah,
and I was
I know Wendy's doing one too.
Right?
Yeah,
I know. So, it's like
I was like, this is so funny.
I know. Like I have this string, and I'm doing one next week with Leah Cole, so it's like this.
Oh yeah, and I just played with Leah. Yeah, and actually, speaking of modern composition stuff, Leah, Lynn, and I just wrote a bunch of pieces or 2 pieces for us to play, and then Lynn and Leah also came with some ideas, and so we have like a very weird kind of like avant chamber record in the works, the 3 of us. And I have no idea what's gonna come of that, but that's awesome. It's really good.
It's awesome. But I was saying to Nick, and again, like, not that I know Nick super well, like we're acquaintances and we know each other, but I was saying like his new record, I was like, this to me, this sounds like the most you record.
Yeah, it is the most him record. It really is.
But I feel like this I feel the same way about this record of yours. Like,
yes,
And so it's, for me, like as a listener, it's so, and as a listener and as a musician, whatever myself, like hearing people like do that is so, it just feels so good. It just like adds another layer to the album.
Absolutely. And I think it's kind of like no surprise that Nick and I both played on each other's records, because I would say that like a pretty like formative experience that got me to eventually sort of pull the trigger on moving to New York was like hanging out and working with him for like a couple of weeks last summer, and just realizing like, oh my God, I could have all of these gay friends who just like all they want to do is like listen to like the nerdiest music in the world and like make like really weird, like hyper specific like songs or pieces. And I was just like, I don't really like have that in Texas.
Yeah.
like this is really cool.
That's awesome. Well, we could probably talk about this record forever, but then we'd be here for 3 hours, and I don't know that anybody wants to listen to that.
Yeah. There are not that many more super fans, I can promise you. Yeah.
So we will move on to the whole reason we're here, sort of.
Yeah.
And as ever, to start, I'm going to ask you, what is the first song that you remember?
So the first song that I ever remember is "You Are My Sunshine," and I just like, if I think back of just like the first thing I remember being a song or something that like you could sing, it was really that song. I remember my mom singing it to me, and we had this book that I think like you would open it and it would like play the song. And it was also like a little picture book that had, I mean, it's like extremely, extremely cute stuff. And that was like, just, I don't know. It's something that I feel like is very primordial, even for me, of like remembering this song. And then like hearing it, I think like it kind of had a resurgence of like, traditional versions of it, like around like the "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou" period of history. And so it kind of like came back into my life, And yeah, it's just like, it's so sweet. It makes me think of my mom every time I listen to it. It makes me think of like her singing it to me and like reading this book when I was a child. And I think it also just, it's like such a classic like folk structure and everything too, that it's, I think it undeniably, it's like those songs kind of impact how you hear the world as you're growing up. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, I have like the weirdest memory of this song. Like I have very early memories, but then my cousin, who's like a total piece of shit, like one of the worst people in the world, he sang this to his wife at his first wedding. Like,
oh my God.
And he can't sing. Like, he sucks. And I just like it, and so now I have this visceral, and I fucking can't stand like my grandmother died 2 years ago, and nobody's heard from. Like, we haven't seen him, and he's like a multi-millionaire con man. Don't
one of those. I
probably shouldn't be saying this on a public. Whatever. Fuck that guy. But this is I love like listening to it, and especially like the version that you sent over.
Oh, it's such a sweet version. Yeah.
Oh, it is. It just warms my heart.
I know. Yeah. But there's also this like shade of melancholy to it. Yeah. Of just like, don't take my sunshine away. And it just like wrecks me. It's like it's really like such a sweet, but also kind of devastating song.
Yeah.
But it is for sure like the first thing I remember. It's like, I can remember some of the first like rock music I heard that like was really that like left an impression. But You Are My Sunshine, I feel like is like the first song that I can remember hearing that like, like that and like Wheels on the Bus or something. But like it's like you remember You Are My Sunshine, I think, more because of the like poignance of the lyrics.
Yeah, sweet but devastating. I mean, that could describe a lot of your music.
Yeah, that's true.
Started early. It's
yeah. You can blame You Are My Sunshine for that.
Well, speaking of devastating, what's the song that makes you cry?
The song that makes me cry is My Love Is All Around You by my friend Lindsay Verrill, who records this Little Mazarn. To be honest with you, when I was making this playlist, I hadn't listened to the song in a while because it just so thoroughly wrecks me. And I was like, I should revisit this, and I could not even make it like 30 seconds in without just absolutely sobbing, to the point where Wendy was like, what is wrong? And I'm like, it's just this song. So something else I'll say too is it's like I often have a hard time like crying at shows. I cry all the time in other aspects of my life, but there have been very few shows that have made me cry, and it's like Sufjan Stevens on the Carrie and Lowell tour, seeing this Eliane Radiku piece performed at Blank Forms, and then literally like every time I've seen Lindsay play this song live. And it's, I think, also a very rare song in that it talks about this like particular, I feel like I'm gonna like cry even just talking about this, because it talks about this particular kind of sadness of seeing your pet like age and die, and it just like fucking wrecks me. And like the thought of like being without my dogs, it's like, but also it's like written from the perspective of the dog too. I feel like at times like the chorus feels like it's like the dog singing, and it's just really, really gets me. And especially like, and now I'm fucking crying about this, but like, especially as like my dog Pierre, who stayed with my ex in Texas, and for like good reason, because I mean, he is a little old man. Like, he would not have done well. He's never been on a plane. He's never been outside of the state. Like, seeing him age and just like not being able to like be there, but then coming back and like actually having him still be so loving, it really makes me think of him like very intensely. And then also my dog Keith, it's just like I look at him and I'm like, you're so young, but like you too will be old one day.
Yeah.
And Lindsay really Lindsay really knocked it out of the park with this one. And on top of that, too, I texted her. I just did some strings for a record she has coming out. And she had texted me about something completely unrelated. And I was like, just so you know, I put My Love Is All Around You on this podcast list as the song that makes me cry the most. And Lindsay was like, that was the first song I ever wrote. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. I was like, way to knock it out of the park and write like the most like tender and poignant and like just absolutely crushing song on your first try. And I know it like blew my mind when she said that, and like obviously she's such an amazing songwriter, but I was just like, how did you write like one of the most perfect songs I've ever heard, and it's like your first like true song by yourself. But that one really gets me more than anything else. I mean, it's like I couldn't even get through just talking about the things that makes me feel without tearing up, and there are so few other songs that I have ever had that kind of response to. And I just feel like, I think it's like a combination of like this thing that is universal, but also really specific, and like framing loss in this way that's like really beautiful, and also that seems to kind of like shift perspectives. There's just nothing else like it. She's amazing. And also like fuck her a little bit for making me cry on the pod right now. Yeah. But also like, Lindsay is a genius.
Yeah, I can't believe this is the first song she ever wrote. I don't know that I'm ever going to get over that.
I know when she texted me that, I was like, should I just quit?
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like, the first song I ever wrote was definitely not like that.
The first song I ever wrote was called State of Danger, and it was
hell yeah.
It was, oh my God. And anyway, we don't need to think about that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, on to things that don't put you in a better mood. Maybe this will.
Yeah. Here we go. So a couple of years ago, I got really into this band, Parsley Sounds, and their song "Ease Yourself and Glide." And I wish I could say that is the origin of the Maurice name, but it's not. But the song "Ease Yourself and Glide" just really is like kind of an instant antidepressant for me. It combines so many things I really love. Like there's this kind of like warbly electronic quality to it, but it also it has like very kind of like classic songcraft in it too, that like, could be comparable to like Elliott Smith or really like any just like very form and like composition obsessed songwriter. And I just love this song. I have like some really great memories. Specifically this year, I think I had like one of the best birthdays of my entire life, and I just remember waking up that day and that was the first thing I listened to, and just being like, God damn, like it's gonna be a fucking great day. Like I was like, I love that song. It kind of ceases to never make me feel anything but like at peace and happy.
Yeah, it feels like it to me. It feels like floating or something.
It does.
It's so good.
It couldn't be titled better or have better lyrics matched for the feeling of that song. It just feels like such a breeze, like kind of coming through everything. And it's just like anytime I'm having like sort of a rough day, or I just sort of like really want to completely not necessarily like check out, but just like sort of drift, I'll put that song and that record on, and it really like takes me there.
Yeah. You should make Ease Yourself and Glide shirts.
Now that's a great idea. I don't think Parsley Sounds as a band anymore, so I can't imagine them getting particularly upset about that.
That would be, oh my God, that'd be so good.
Yeah.
Let me know if you do that so I can buy one.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, everybody's favorite question. What is objectively the greatest song of all time, Mari?
That would be If You Could Save Yourself, You Would Save Us All by Ween.
Wow.
Yeah. I had a lot of other thoughts for this answer, and I think that how I would answer this would literally changes on almost a day-to-day basis. But Ween has been a band that is like so insanely important to me. When I was in middle school, I found them because I was going through a pretty unfortunate jam band phase. um, and I like was really into the habit of downloading bootleg Fish shows and making like mix CDs of my favorite songs from them. And one of the songs that I found from there was Roses Are Free by Ween. And I was just like, what is this? I was like, this song is amazing. And I like didn't really. So many of the Ween albums have the like parental advisory sticker, so I was like, "There's no way I'm getting this past my parents." But one of the records that like is arguably the crassest Ween record, "God Ween Satan," does not have a parental advisory sticker, and that's because it came out on like Restless Records, and so they didn't have the like same regulations as like Elektra or whatever, and so I got that one first, and it was just like life changing. I think just like there are a lot of things like Wendy's bandmate and Editrix recently told Wendy that he thinks my music just sounds like Ween most of the time. And I was like, honestly sick because it's like not even something I'm necessarily going for. But I was like, I love that somehow that influence translates. But Quebec was like came out also when I was in middle school, and I kind of just like instantly loved it. I saw them on that tour. And it was just like amazing. I saw them with my dad and at Austin City Limits and my best friend, and it was just like I looked back at the set list and I was like, this could not have been like a more perfect show to go to. But this song in particular, it closes out Quebec, and I think that it is just like a perfect piece of music. I love anything that has kind of a sweet like form, and like the fact that the chorus and the verse of the song, like the verse is like they're in like a totally different like meter, they're in a totally different key, and then the chorus is just like completely unrelated, and like it's like goes into this like waltz mode, and then also like it shifts up, I think like a minor third to the chorus, like the whole song. It's just like incredible. And I think that like it also has some of my favorite lyrics too, because it's like it does this thing that I feel like Ween is so good that is like something I love about I love in like most lyricists I like look for, where it's like very funny but also so dark and sad. And I think that this song is like amazing at doing that, because it's like it also does this move that I really like where the first verse seems like more rooted in this portrayal of like a narrative, an arc. Like he's talking about like this drive home, and like then the chorus comes in, and then the second verse things just start to get more oblique and kind of deconstructed. And I feel like that's always sort of how I tend to write songs too. And it's like one of my favorite things when a songwriter does that, where it's like you sort of get this like very specific picture of like the actual narrative or what's happening, and then it starts to kind of deteriorate more into just like the feeling of it. And everything about this song I think is just perfect. Like the production and the arrangements are really beautiful. The way that like the verses have like this more electronic, like muted quality to them, transitioning into this like bombastic chorus, and also the vocal performance I think is like one of the most powerful like I've ever heard on recording. Like it has such a like insane ramped up arc of like this very restrained verses, and then like a somewhat like anthemic chorus the first time, and then by the time you get to the second and he's just screaming up an octave, it really destroys me. And I think like there's also a move when he goes up to that octave where he's just like yelling and belting, but there are all of these really quiet, very cleanly sung harmonies in the background. And it's just like there's all these like little tiny details of arrangement in there, like the kind of like swirling like drony sound in the second verse, like when there's like the more kind of like goofy MIDI piano stuff. I just love it. And I've been really obsessed too with, there's a clip of them playing the song live for the first time at this show. And it's like really rowdy. And they start playing it, and like people are kind of like a little skeptical. You get the sense like it just seems like a pretty like kind of rowdy like rock club crowd, and then they get to that second chorus and like they play like by the time they get to the second verse, people are like shutting up and already are sort of like, what's going on here? Because it's also like very sort of, it's like both a very classic Ween song and like the sweet like structure and everything, but it's also so completely different from a lot of things they do too, because of how sophisticated it is on kind of every level. Not saying that they don't have other songs like that, but I think formally it's like a really interesting one. And I think that um like by the time they get to the second chorus in that video, like the crowd is losing their fucking minds. And Jeaner is singing the like chorus, and he is just like clearly going through it and having like, it's like so powerful. And then they like kind of pan over to Dean Ween, and he just has this like look of pride in his friend for like writing this like amazing like vulnerable masterpiece of a song.
Wow, that's all. Hey, I feel like I don't know, like I missed the Ween boat or something. But this is the second time someone's picked a Ween song, and
oh
like
wow,
both times, yeah, and both the other one was Rosalie picked Sarah.
Oh, I love that song. That's that's like one of my favorites too. Yeah.
Well, and it was so, and I think I said this to her. I was just like, this is making me rethink what I think I know, because it's like I love that song and I love this song, and so I feel like I need to spend some time to rethink and listen to things, and because I feel like, because again, because this song, it's an incredible song, and like I was like, God, what did I think this band was? Like, I don't know.
I think a lot of people have like a certain perception of them because it's like they do have like a lot of goofy elements, which is like honestly a thing I really like about them too, because it's like life is goofy sometimes, but it's like they really understand this thing of like this balance between like the absurd and then like the really intense and emotional. And like I kind of feel like they're like this rare band that has a song about like every possible emotion you could experience. And it's like they're very special to me, and also their ethos around doing everything. Wendy and I have been like both part of the reason I think like my relationship with Wendy has been so great is because it's a Ween for Ween relationship. And I think that we both have had moments where like, holy shit, like we can just like listen to this band all the time. Our other partners were driven crazy by it. But like it's really they're really such a great band, and I've been getting so much more into them, and I feel like the last time I had a really deep phase with them was probably like 10 or 12 years ago, but like they're kind of a band that's always like sort of there for me. But they're really special, and it's been interesting too, because I think like as I've been kind of going through this particular Ween phase, I keep meeting people who are just like, hell yeah, they rock. Like,
that's awesome.
And I feel like they're kind of like a quiet influence on a lot of like experimental music being made nowadays, because they were such early adopters of like this very like home produced, like lo-fi aesthetic for so many years. And then also like their first few records just sound unbelievably fucked up. Like the Pod and Pure Guava, it's like, I mean, it's like, I feel like Pure Guava is like the start of like all modern music in a way. It's just like so bizarre. It's like all like drum machines, all like really weird pitched up and down like vocals. And I was like, I think it's kind of like telling too. I saw something recently where Aphex Twin said that record and the Pod are two of his like favorite album, like top 10 favorite albums of all time. And I was like, it makes a lot of sense, because it's like there's this similar sense of just like experimentation and kind of like being serious but not taking yourself too seriously, that I think is like evident in like what he does and like a lot of other like artists that kind of like follow in that wake.
Yeah, I think, I don't know. One of the things that when I did this with Shane Parrish, he was saying in this was in like the Patreon section where we were talking shit on stuff. But he was saying, he's like, I don't like to tell people like, oh, I don't like, he's like, I just tell people I don't have access to this yet. And I think that's a really, and so I'm thinking like, maybe now I will have access to Ween. So I need to go down that road one of these days. And
I will also say that the record, If You Could Save Yourself is on Quebec, is just one of the best albums I think ever made. It's like, it's definitely like the darkest and like most emotional, but it's still at the same time, it's like it manages to be, it has that like perfect balance of like being kind of funny and kind of snarky, like still being able to be like, yeah, like this is painful, but I'm like able to sort of pull back and also look at how ridiculous this is too, which I feel like is something I'm always trying to do with my music.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that sounds like exactly my shit. So, okay.
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay. This weekend it's gonna start.
This weekend.
Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what's the song you used to love, but now you heard it recently, or if you think about it now, you're like, ooh.
So my choice for this is what was previously the song that would make me cry without fail every single time, which is "Writer in the Dark" by Lorde. It came to me at like it came to me at like a time where I was like very like vulnerable and kind of like in early stages of like transitioning, like when and sort of figuring things out in my life when Melodrama came out, and obviously it like hit very hard for that reason. I got back into that record last year when I was on tour with Lomelda, because Hannah, my bandmate, was really getting into it. I think especially with like the context of it being like this document of like, tumultuous love and and especially like kind of young, like crushing relationships. And she was like in like a very like kind of nascent stage of dating this person who's now her partner, and I think was just like really feeling a lot of the like big romantic feelings. And this song used to just absolutely devastate me on like every level. It's like I would get to the chorus and I would just like, if I needed to cry or felt like I like needed to and couldn't like access it for whatever reason, I would put this on. It would just be like instant. And for a while, so much to the point that when we were on that Lomelda tour, I was like, "Yeah, I don't think we can get to this song." But like, I heard the record again recently, and I still really like it. I think it's like good, but it just like doesn't have the same weight or effect for me anymore. And I mean, I think it's like maybe some of it's like maturity to some degree now, like a newfound maturity. But it used to just be like, I mean, I'm such a sucker for so much like pop. It's like I've like cried to Unwritten by Natasha Bedingfield within the last year because I was just like really stoned and it like hit me at the right time. And it wasn't even her version of it. It was people singing it to a golden retriever in a TikTok. Like, so I'm not. Yeah,
you go down a whole rabbit hole of crying to TikTok. Joe Randy and I talked about that recently, and it was just like, just fucking sitting there watching the stupidest shit in tears, and like,
for real.
I know, like, man.
So yeah, I'm like I'm not immune to like crying to like. I say this, so it's like I don't think that it's necessarily like that, but I think that it's just like, for some reason, I think the kind of meaning of this song and the very kind of adolescent emotions of it have just kind of like worn off on me. And it's like I'll still like, enjoy songs from Melodrama when I hear them in context and like hear them like just sort of being played around. But it's not something I necessarily feel like I want to go back to as much. And also, thinking about like how intensely the song used to make me feel is like a little low-key embarrassing because I didn't think I was like necessarily like that type of gay, but I guess I was for a second. And so it was really kind of like surprising to realize that the song has like lost a lot of its power for me. Yeah.
That's funny. Well, what's the song that people hate? Whoever these people are, people hate it. You don't care. You love it. And I can't believe the answer to this isn't Smash Mouth.
No, everyone loves Smash Mouth. What are you talking about? No, the song choice for this is Larking by the Red Krayola.
Man.
Man, I fucking love the Red Krayola, and I
Me
especially
too.
love Hazel, the like kind of later one of their later
Yes.
Drag City records that has like, Jim and David on it.
Yeah.
I think it's like really special. I was obsessed with this record in college. When I heard it, I was like already so deeply into both Jim O'Rourke and David Grubbs's solo catalogs. And then I started getting into the Red Krayola, and I got this record, and I was like, this rocks. I was like, this is like the best thing I've ever heard. This does everything I wanted to do. And in my like young brain, I was just like, this is normal rock music, because my threshold for this is obviously very high. And
Right.
so I would put this on like in the car with like my girlfriend at the time and with like my friends. And I have never had people be more mad at any music choice I've ever made in my life. And it kind of continues to this day. I think I tried to make someone listen to this within the last couple of years, and they were like, "Will you please listen to literally anything else?" But I think that this song is particularly the one that really breaks people, because it has like these psycho lyrics. It's really minimal and it's really dissonant. And I think that this is always the one that like every single time. It's like this song and Duck and Cover on Hazel are the 2
Mhm.
where I'm just like, yeah, this is great. And people are
Yeah.
like, make it stop right now. Like, but I love it so much. And I think the whole record is great, but I feel like this is the song that I often put on being like, yeah, it's kind of like slow and sexy,
Right.
completely not thinking about the fact that it's like polytonal, and like the lyrics are like, I see a couple of kids and she's fucking her and he's taking pills, like, and like all this stuff, like with this weird old guy crooning
Yeah.
over it. I was like, to me, I think it's like one of the best things in the world, but
Yeah.
it was an extremely unpopular song for literally everybody else in my life. um, and it was like, it was definitely one of the first moments where I was like, huh, maybe my taste is like weird. And it's like, I knew I was into like kind of fucked up shit, already, but I didn't think it was that,
Yeah.
uh, that like out there most of the time. And especially because there are songs that are like Duke of Newcastle on this record is just like real kind of slick pop. And then the
Mhm.
last song on that record just kind of, to me, sounds like it could be on like, a Jim O'Rourke solo pop record or something.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I feel like this particular song is the one that would really break people every time when I would put the record on.
Yeah. I had I can't remember who it was now, but it was this song. Like, it was a very similar experience of I was being like, this is awesome. And they were like,
Yeah.
this is creeping me the fuck out.
Yeah.
What is wrong?
Yeah.
Like, I know, isn't it great? What do you mean?
Yeah. I've had that experience many times in my life. I can remember the first time I got The Drift by Scott Walker. I was in high school, and I was like, man, I was so hungry to just listen to every weird thing in the world in high school. And so
Yeah.
I remember buying The Drift and getting so excited to put it on in the car with my best friend and just like cranking it. And we got to Jesse, and he was like, Mari, I have to listen to something else. Like, this is the scariest music I've ever heard in my entire life. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, but I think more people in my life have understood The Drift in a way, because it is like so avant-garde and like this like classical, like basically like this almost classical piece that I think people can understand in that context. And the Red Krayola is so definitely like a rock band that
Right.
I think that they're just like, what are you doing to me? Like, this is like, a band shouldn't sound like this.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. No, I totally can understand. God, I love this record.
Yeah,
man,
me too.
I love the Red Krayola.
One of my faves. I listened to one of their other like records with Jim and David recently, and it was also just so good. Like, they're such a great band.
I recorded one of these with David a couple weeks ago. It should be out.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And he had some great like Mayo Thompson stories in it and stuff.
Oh yeah,
because we talked a lot about like Mayo's solo record, because that's like Jim's or David's favorite,
one of the like best records of all time too. Yeah.
And,
Yeah, I read David's like book about touring recently, and there are some really entertaining chapters that are very obviously about the Red Krayola that are just like really delightful to read.
Oh man, I haven't read that. I need to read that. I've read some of his books, but I haven't read that one. So, yeah. Anyway, I could do a whole podcast about David Grubbs because he's amazing.
Me too. Yeah, he's one of my favorite people, both as a musician and as a person.
Yeah,
exactly. I will just say a quick David anecdote, like that I feel like really illustrates what a like sweet guy he is, and just like such a like kind person. I saw him. He was doing a duo with Wendy, and I hadn't seen him in a few weeks or something. And he came up, and the first thing he asked me was, "How is Keith? How was Keith, my dog's birthday party?"
Oh my god!
And I was just like, amazing. I was like, I can't believe like you've been thinking about my dog. Like this is you're like one of my heroes.
It's amazing.
Like, it's just like so touching that you're like you are like thinking about my life and thinking about my dog's life.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's wonderful. Okay. Do you consider yourself a romantic?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Are you kidding me? Have you heard my music? Yeah.
I ask everybody. I was like, I don't know why I'm asking this, but well, what's the most romantic song?
The most romantic song to me that I feel like whenever I listen to when I'm kind of in like very deep love or crush stages is "No by Heart" by American Analog Set. I could have easily picked like almost any song from the record "No by Heart." "Punk as Fuck" was my original choice, but then I was like, you know what? Actually, "No by Heart" hits me a lot harder, and it just I think it's just really beautiful, and I really love the idea of like in the lyrics to this song too, of like equating like being fascinated with a person and being in love with like film and with like books, and sort of like how to me it makes me think a lot about how tied into those early feelings like those things are, like of kind of like bonding over that and like really experiencing it. And I think it's also like very romantic because it's like in those verses too, it doesn't even necessarily seem like it could be about like a person. It seems like it could be about like an actual like piece of art too. Yeah. And I think it's just like very beautiful, and like the sense of like, equating love to those things, to equating love to art, and then also like the idea of it going on and on as they keep singing too is, I think, such a part of actually like falling in love. And I think it's a song that like really makes me think about like love in this like enduring way, like kind of past that initial phase and like seeing the potential in it, but also just like longing for that too. And just everything about the like music, I feel like really reinforces it. The just like, I mean, I'm a huge American Analog Set fan, and there's just something about that band where it's so muted and restrained at all times, and it's just like kind of everything is like working in tandem in this like really beautiful way where it's like the guitar on this song feels like it's just part of like the snare drum, and then there's like that little slide part that just kind of like cascades in, and it's just kind of like it sounds like air, in this way of just like it just sounds like you're kind of like it's like a mist like enveloping you. And I really love it. And I think that obviously adds to like a big quality of the romanticism for it. But it's also like, it does that in this way that's very different from like Cocteau Twins or any sort of like shoegaze band, where it's like, where with that, and like I love that music too, obviously, but it's like, it's all very like layered and like kind of like textured. And I feel like American Analog Set, it's just like they pull everything away so that there's like nothing really to hide. And I kind of feel like that makes the longing and makes like the way that this song sounds and the intimacy of it just hit so much harder.
Yeah, like it feels so delicate, like it could just break apart at any second. And I think that's one of the things they do, like one of my notes on here is they have this way of doing songs like thematically or whatever feel very heavy, but the music is so light, and it's like that sort of tension that comes from those things, I think just adds, it's so like, especially, you know, when I think of like romance, like there's this tension and that longing and that, and you know, it's like the hairs on the back of your neck standing up kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And as I was talking about this song, that literally happened to me. Because I was like, man, I love this song. But yeah, it's just like, I think that's like a big part of their power too, is it's just like, it is like the intimacy, it is the frailty of so much of their music. And even when they're like rocking, I feel like that's still there, because they'll just play so slow so much of the time that you're like, even though there's like distortion and it's like heavy and like, or even like on the songs that are faster, it still is just like so dry and so bare that it feels like kind of anything could happen. Like the song could just collapse. And I think that's like, they're very, very special to me in that way.
Yeah. What's the song that changed your perspective on an artist? For better or for worse?
This is a definitely for better thing, and it's also a slightly embarrassing thing on my part. But this is the song "There Comes a Time" by Tony Williams.
Oh man!
And so my perspective of Tony Williams, to be fair, I had like a pretty big jazz phase when I was in college, and then I sort of just stopped for a while. And I think a big part of it was getting kind of burnt out on like having to deal with like jazz dudes in music school. And when I was like in Cal Arts, I worked with like Wadada Leo Smith, and he was great, and like I loved all of those people. But it was always this sort of tension of like the real kind of like improv, like experimental music, like freaks like myself. Because in his ensemble, I played prepared banjo, and then like these dudes who were just like hardcore jazzers that were like really obsessed with like doing everything like the most kind of riffy and perfect technically. But because of like these kind of blind spots, there was a lot I didn't know. And so my perception of Tony Williams was very much kind of like early work and like very kind of like cool jazz, like kind of like early post bop stuff. And I didn't really know that he was an absolute psychopath, like as a musician, and was doing like these psychopath complimentary, like obviously,
for sure,
but was making these like records that were just so bizarre, and like I had no idea he wrote songs. And so one of the first nights that Wendy and I ever hung out, she put this on, and I was like, "What the fuck is this?" I was like, "I cannot believe like what I'm hearing." And since then, needless to say, I've had a pretty big Tony Williams phase this year. But I just like love so much. I just had this perception of him as like, you know, just like a jazz drummer, like, and kind of like left at that. And I had no idea that he was like so experimental, and also that he was so like into songs, like, because it's such an interesting thing, and like to me does not seem like super common to like be making these records like that are still sort of being framed as like a jazz artist, but that like are only kind of related to that in this like very sort of like nebulous way. I mean, it's like, I shouldn't say nebulous, but it's like, you know, sonically it sounds like something completely else. And and that song in particular just like completely rearranged how I thought about this guy and thought about his music, and like made him someone who became like who is like quickly becoming a very important figure to me. And like it completely changed my perception just about like everything that he does and who he is. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, and it's such a good song. It's like
such a good song.
I love his vocals. Like I love the quality of his voice and how he doubles it and sings. And then I love the lyrics. Like, and I love that he's not trying to be this like super polished singer either. And I think that that's like one of my favorite things about his music, is that it's like he's hidden everything. Like it sounds great, but it's like it has this sort of like, you know, almost like lo-fi quality to it, like this like very DIY perspective, and he's just like ripping and playing like this complicated stuff, and then singing his like beautiful kind of plaintive little voice, like, and I just love it.
Yeah, there's another version of this from what's it called? It's from the 80s. And like I don't like the version as much, but his vocal performance on it is even more like kind of raw, and oh my god, it's so good. But yeah, this song, if this is like jazz from like a totally different planet or something.
I know. That was and that was how I felt when I heard it. I was just like, man, if someone had showed this to me, like my relationship to like so many things, I think would be like so different, because I just like I really had no idea. I just like, it was like a huge blind spot, and I think I just kind of like subconsciously was like, yeah, whatever, like I don't need this, and then come to find out that it's like literally like my favorite music. Yeah.
Well, you probably could have maybe picked this song as your favorite lyrics, but what are your favorite lyrics?
My favorite lyrics are King's Crossing by Elliott Smith.
Yeah, that's
it. Kind of doesn't get better than that.
It kind of doesn't.
And he like pretty meticulously, from what I understand, he pretty meticulously like worked on them too. But I mean, it's just like, it's like the perfect kind of song, like I was talking about with Ween earlier, of just like, you have these things that like, there's this definite narrative, and that is there for you to read into, but it's more about these kind of like broken apart, like fragmented images, and the images are so visceral and insane, and like they're like funny in like the darkest, bleakest way. Like, I can't get over the fact that he wrote the line, like, it doesn't matter that I have no sex life. All I want to do now is inject my ex-wife. I was like, dude, that's like intense for me, even. Like, I was like, that's like, I don't think I would fucking go there. But he is just like incredible. And like there's so many things that stand out, like both as just like insanely vivid, beautiful imagery, but also like that are so moving and profoundly sad. Like the Skinny Santa bringing something for me, like that's one of my favorite like parts of it too. God, it's just like, it's like a perfect song. And the chorus, when it hits, like the way it moves up melodically, and also the fact that like the course's lyrics are different every time too. Like, God, it's an amazing song, and it's so it's like it really balances this thing of being like so funny, like, but like also it's incredibly mean and incredibly sad at the same time. And it just like, it's one of the few songs too, I feel like I have, like, if I started singing it, I could probably like get all the way through it without like looking at like lyrics or anything, because they're just they're so vivid and so specific, but also like the way that they're delivered and the cadence and the like pentameter of everything he's doing like reinforces them so like heavily, because it's not only just that it's like, oh yeah, like cool images or whatever. Right. It's like the fact that like the way that the text is set and the way that like everything works out metrically, like also makes it like the catchiest song in the world somehow.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's like I didn't know this, but that seems I knew this but didn't know this. Like clearly, yeah, he worked really hard on the like it is so. Oh my god, yeah. Like just thinking about it, the way that he, I mean, this is, when people use it, like I don't like this word, it makes me feel weird, but like the idea of like songcraft. This is it. This is like
totally, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's like parts of it where if it's sort of the equivalent of like watching a movie through like your eye, like fingers over your eye, because it's like some of the imagery and the way it like makes your skin crawl, kind of. But like in not, I don't know, like in a good way, but like I mean, it's just so impactful, and and it's and there's just so much wrapped into like a 3-minute song. Like, all the emotions.
The idea of like covering your eyes like while listening to the lyrics, I think that was kind of my first like reaction to hearing this too. was I remember like I think I heard this probably for the first time in high school because it was like shortly after he'd like passed away, and this guy who was like my mentor in San Antonio, this amazing guitar player Joe Reyes, uh he was really big into Elliott Smith, and I really liked the self-titled record and didn't really know much else, but he burned me a copy of From a Basement on a Hill like right when it came out. And I remember like hearing this song and being like, I don't know if I should be hearing this, like I don't know if I should be hearing this guy talk about this. And it really like it's so impactful, and yeah, it like really runs like the course of every possible emotion, and like it's just amazing. I sang this once, and I feel like your reaction when I said these were my favorite lyrics, of just being like, yep, like it's just kind of undeniable. Like I feel like one time, actually, like on my 30th birthday at karaoke, I went to karaoke, and they had this karaoke event in Austin called Karaoke Underground, where it was mostly like kind of like indie rock songs and stuff. And they had a karaoke of King's Crossing, and I did it. And I remember the KJ was like, wow, yeah, so don't know how we're gonna move on after that. Like, because everyone else was singing fun stuff like Lit T Gray and like, these like, like very like kind of dancey songs, and I was like, oh, I'm fucking doing King's Crossing for sure. And then I think that started a trend of like my friend Spencer Dobbs saying Then I See a Darkness by Bonnie Prince Billy, also a song I could say has like the best lyrics in the world. But Spencer started singing that song, and then at that point the KJ was like, hey, you guys, we have a night like that's dedicated for just like the sad songs like at this time of the year. Like clearly we were like on one, just like because it was like Elliott Smith, like Bonnie Prince Billy, and then I'm trying to remember, I think there is some other like a Nico K song or something that was also devastating all in a row after that.
It's like, oh wow, that's awesome. What cover song is better than the original?
Bird on a Wire by Stina Nordenstam, hands down. I almost picked her version of Purple Rain, but I was like, I can't do that. I love Prince too much. I was like, ultimately, I feel like her version of Purple Rain is just like a completely different beast entirely. But her cover of Bird on a Wire is just amazing. It's such a like weird reharmonization and reduction of the song that still keeps like these little fragments of things from the original in it. And like I love the original song too. I'm a big Leonard Cohen person. And my mom especially is. But I've actually never showed this to her, and I feel like I should. But I think that like just everything about the arrangement of this song, and like I love when a cover song like basically like reharmonizes and like kind of changes everything about the original, but still leaves like a grain of it in there. And I think that this does that really well. And I also just feel like the production and arrangement of it are like totally shocking. Because it sounds like when I first heard this, I was like, this has to be like a later release of hers. And I was like, it's one of her earliest albums. It's like early 90s. And it's just crazy that like it sounds like that. Like she's amazing. All of the covers she does on that record are phenomenal. But that one I feel like transcends every other version of Bird on a Wire I've ever heard. Like because it still has the kind of like drunken, sad, like kind of late night gazing that like the original has, but it's like in this totally other way where it's like I feel like with Leonard Cohen, I listen to it and I imagine him like sitting on like a fucking like mountainside or something, like crying and taking the guitar. And with the Stina Nordenstam version, it's like she's like singing from the sewer, like she's like the lady in the radiator from Eraserhead or something. Like it has that kind of quality to it.
Yeah, no, I hadn't thought about this in a minute. And when I saw this, I was like, oh yeah, that's good. And I can't believe that it's from like this could have come out yesterday, and I'd be like, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, it sounds like any like Dean Blunt, Joanne Robertson type release. It's nuts. It's like it, and I feel like they have to be influenced by her. I feel like when I listen to this too, because they often 100%. Like interpolate like melodies or lyrics from other songs, but with like a completely different arrangement and production and chords. And so I'm like, I'm like, there's no way they're not listening to People Are Strange by Stina Nordenstam.
Okay, well, what's the sexiest song?
The sexiest song? I think that is Do You Wanna by Astrid Sonne, which is really sexy. I don't even really particularly want kids or am capable of like having them. But I hear that and I'm like, yeah, man, I do want to fucking have a baby. Like, it's so good, and it's like, but I love it too because it's like it's really sexy, but it's also like very dissonant. Like, it's like you kind of forget about how like dissonant and weird it is because of how sexy it is, and it just sort of all reinforces this like very hot like notion and like a very much like, and I think that it's kind of cool too because it's like I feel like the song can be read as this like like fuck anthem, but then it can also be read as like this sort of like pleading with your partner of like, what are we doing, like what are we doing with our relationship.
Yeah.
But yeah, which that not so sexy, but I like, I mean, for me, it's like, I like anything that kind of feels like more than one thing. And I mean, I think that song is really sexy. I have literally had sex to it. And so, I think that like, it's something that I just kind of feel like universally, it has like something, a quality of it that's like, just, it's like hot enough to really like be like a aphrodisiac of a song, but it's also not like particularly ridiculous or in your face about it in this way that makes it like kind of more subtle and even more sexy somehow.
Yeah, there's this restraint to it that it again like there's and kind of those different themes you're talking like that, and it adds like a tension to it, all of which are just up the sexiness. It's just like
I know, yeah, because it's like yeah, even thinking about like that alternate read of it, it's like yeah, it creates this tension which is like kind of hot,
yeah. Yeah. Okay, the two big questions remain. So what is the song that means the most to you?
All right. And I can't guarantee I'm not going to get through this answer without crying either. But the song that means the most to me is All Delighted People by Sufjan Stevens. Really a hell of a song. Yeah. And this song has like a lot of intensely like personal connections for me. My ex-wife of like 10 years and I, when we first like started dating and getting together, I have a vivid memory of sitting in her car and like there were a lot of questions about like things that we had to do to like be together at that time. And I remember we just sat in the car and listened to all 10 minutes of this. And it was like, it's always stuck with me as like a really like pivotal part in that relationship and in my life. It also, I mean, this song, like when it initially came out, I think was like kind of at this big crossroads of trying to figure out what I wanted to do musically and creatively. And it felt like this insane thing to hear this piece of music that like was by somebody who I had really admired, who was like a formative music person for me. And then to hear them like really embrace like a lot of chaos and a lot of like these like proggy forms and things, like all these things that I wanted to experiment with in my own work and life. And I was like, I cannot believe this. But I feel like the song really kind of like bookends this relationship I had with Hannah, and Hannah is still like one of my best friends, and we talk every day and keep updated on like the dogs, but like a lot of life and security and stuff was tied up in being with this person because we were together for over a decade, and I think like last year I was on tour with a different Hannah, with Hannah Reed from Lomelda, and she's a very big Sufjan fan, and she was like, I kind of want to listen to this record, and I was like, okay. And that we put this on, and it was shortly after Hannah and I had made the decision to split up, and it just like immediately opened the floodgates so heavily, because I was like, it felt like this, like, ending of a chapter, like hearing it, and it was like, it made me cry uncontrollably in front of Hannah Reid, and it's so rare that happens, like, to like just like kind of like when I'm like on the road with a friend, and I was like very, very vulnerable in that moment. And I think that like the actual lyrical content of that song just really hit me in that moment too, because it is just like about like still having like so much love for this person that like you used to care about, that you used to like share all of these things with, but like, and just being like, I tried so hard to like make all of this happen and work, but it just doesn't, but I still love you. And like, it's just like devastating. And I feel like it really talks about that in this way that's like so like nakedly vulnerable. And it's kind of like, also feels like, I know that there's like an alternate version of this too, and that version's fine. But like this original version, it's like, it feels like it just has to be this way. Like this song has to be this way. It has to have all of these parts and movements, because it's like the only way you can fully actually like express this range of like sadness, but also like optimism and gratitude in the same way. And it just like, yeah, it's really powerful. And I also think that like the interpolation of Sounds of Silence too, I feel like it's just like, that's such a great move, because it's just like, yeah, this is literally like you're thinking about like the songs that are like speaking to you in these moments in a way. And so to me, it just like, it really kind of demarks like these pretty big parts of my life. Like it kind of like seems like the opening and closing of this like part of my life, but it still just like really impacts me. And I think also like the way that it made me sort of realize like, that it was possible to like merge all of these ideas at the same time too, was really powerful. And I think it was especially powerful coming from somebody like Sufjan Stevens, who it's like was such a figurehead, maybe albeit reluctantly, for like the indie rock that was like popular when I was like in high school and a teenager. And I feel like he's one of the rare people of like that time period who has just continued to not really settle down. Where it's like, I don't love like, all of his later records or anything, but I'm like, man, like at least you're trying something new. Like at least you're like making these choices and these decisions that aren't you just like kind of rehashing the same thing over and over again. And he's not afraid of like the vulnerability in so much of this too. And I think that it's like, this is an amazing piece of music, and is really important to me, because it's like, it also really shows that like you can be vulnerable, but also be like very like, heady at the same time.
Yeah. I don't even know what to say.
Yeah.
I was going to say, God, the line, I'm afraid of letting go of choices I have made. Like,
I know. That is like one of the best. It's just so real. It's like, I like literally know that exact feeling. And just like, I feel like so much of the kind of like end of the song of being like talking about how you've tried your best, and like the sort of reiteration of like, I still love you a lot, and then the world is a mess. I'm just like, God, it still is. Like, it's always like that. It's like everything's all fucked up. And it's like, then like you're like losing this person, but like also not really, just like the way you interact with each other is changing. And it's so, it's just like so heavy and sad.
Yeah. Goodness. Okay. All right. Well, with that, what is, at least in this moment in time, although I'm gonna guess this might be your answer all the time, what is your favorite song?
Well, I definitely took it as an all-time answer. And I mean, this is really stretching the limits of song. But I mean, figure you're probably using it pretty loosely. So
people can define it how they want to. So I leave it open to interpretation.
For me, I think this is automatic writing by Robert Ashley. I literally have it tattooed on my arm for that reason. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Like, yeah, here, let's see if I can get a better angle of it. But yeah, it's like, yeah. So obviously it means a lot to me. It's the only music related tattoo I have. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to think of anything else that like really thoroughly rewired my brain in such a way. And so like, that's definitely such a huge, like it has such a huge impact on me in my life. And so like before I heard this, I was already pretty into like music concrete. And I had started really getting into I was a lot of French composers initially, like Michel Chion and Francis Dumont, all people I still really like, and of course, the Pierres, Henry and Schaeffer, and all of them. And I loved all of that music a lot, and was kind of like diving more and more into a lot of like electroacoustic things. And there's sort of like a two-part thing that made me realize like, oh, there's like this sort of other side of this type of music that like I want to be in and I want to be a part of. And the first thing was Nuno Cannavaro, who I found Flux Cuba, I think through actually this English professor where I did my undergrad, put a track on a mix, or I can't remember how I found this record, but I wound up like buying it from the like Jim O'Rourke like Drag City sub label, because at the time I think it was like still the only way you could really hear it. And I was just like, man, this has all the things I like about all of this like very difficult and collagey music, but it's like sounds nice to listen to.
Right. Yep.
Not that those other things don't, but it's more just like it's more like tonal at times and like palatable. And then I think literally Nuno Cannavaro, that's top artist on Last FM at the time, was Robert Ashley. And I was like, who's this Robert Ashley guy? I got to hear him. And so I think I heard like Tap Dancing in the Sand and like first, and that record was amazing. And I started getting into the operas, and then I heard Automatic Writing, and it was like this feeling of just like sinking into this pit, like the first time I listened to it, but like just being like, what is happening? Nothing, I don't know. It like it has made me cry. Like it's so beautiful and so like delicate. It has the same sort of sense of delicacy. I mean, where it's like, it feels like anything could kind of like happen and it could fall apart, but also it just kind of feels like it's enveloping you and it's all around you at the same time. And it also does these things too, where, I mean, it is like very funny sometimes, like, because occasionally you get these little snippets of text that are legible from Robert Ashley. Like, I think that was time where he's like, who taught me everything I know. Like, just like, and it's very clearly in there, and you're like, wait, what? And it kind of like takes you out of it for a second, but also it just enhances this experience of like feeling like you're in this like room, and the like weird kind of clicky sounds that I think are like the result of a lot of like ring modulator like artifacts. It's just like so beautiful. And I think about like the organ in the background too, how it just sounds like there's a band like rehearsing in this room next door. And like, I once wrote a piece that like, it probably will never get performed. I don't even know if I have it like on file anymore, but the whole idea was like to basically stage like a situation like Automatic Writing, where like there would be a band like playing another room away. Like this really simple motif over and over again occasionally, because it's just like, I don't know, it's such a definite feeling of like hearing something muffled, like hearing something that is like removed, hearing a song from another room. And it's a sensation that is, I think, very hard to capture in music a lot of the time. It's definitely something I've tried to do in my own work, obviously. But I feel like automatic writing is like one of the first times you really have that sensation of like almost like voyeurism of like there is something happening in another room that may or may not be related to this. And in fact, like the first time I heard this, I remember like taking my headphones off and being like, "Is that the song? Like, or is there something like listening to music really loudly?" And it really like, I don't know. It's just, I think it's literally like the best piece of music of all time because it is barely music at times. And it just makes me feel so much for something that is so minimal and simple. It just like, I don't know, it's like a really great like abstract painting where it's like all of a sudden you start seeing all of these other things in it, and it's like it makes you think of other experiences in your life, and like it kind of like puts you in these like headspaces you don't necessarily anticipate getting in. And that's not even like getting into like the actual like concept of the piece of this like way of like kind of capturing his, you know, mumbled like speech to himself, and like it's like sort of his like I'm sitting in a room in a way where it's like like I'm doing this because I have these like vocal tics and I want to like capture them and like correct them in a way, but for him that just becomes this like even further like like layering of it, whereas with Alvin Lucier, it's like this masking until everything is like smoothed over. And then with Robert Ashley, it's more just like it starts to call those like tics even more into question in this like weird focal way where, yeah, I mean, it's like, I just feel like so many things are invented in this piece, and it's such a different kind of idea of like music concrete and like how to structure something. And it feels, it's like, I don't know too much about, I've read so much about Robert Ashley, and I don't know too much about like how this was necessarily structured formally, but it really feels like there are like these kind of motifs that swing back around at certain times, like with the organ or with like the like ring modulators, and the voice speaking in French. Like it just seems like it's kind of constantly like hovering, and like you sort of like hear something and then you're like, oh, but I'm hearing it again, but now it's just the organ, or like now like somebody else is saying this. Yeah, I think it's just, I could go on and on about this forever. I think it's like my favorite piece of music maybe ever written. And I feel like I could easily say that about like Private Parts as well. I actually, the only other this is so goofy, but the only other tattoo I really like desperately want is I want to get the Private Parts text, the album cover that's disappearing, as a tramp stamp. So I gotta find someone who will do that, because it's that, I feel like that's like it kind of started as like a joke, and now I'm like, actually I have to do this. I was like, I gotta be the person with like 2 fucking Robert Ashley tattoos for whatever reason. But no, he's, I mean, like my favorite composer in so many ways, and I just think that like his work is so powerful, and like I love the operas and I love all of that. But he's so good at like doing the thing that I feel like is kind of a theme with a lot of this, where it's like it's very moving and like very like abstract, but it also is still pretty funny too. It's like, or like there's this part of it that's like even automatic writing, like the little like vocal statements, the actual content of what the like organ and drums are playing is pretty funny, because it just sounds like sort of every kind of like, you know, like soul band rehearsing or something.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. This is like one of the greatest pieces of music ever. I love it so much, and knowing how important it is to you, it just makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Like it's like, okay, yeah, I could, that tracks in a very good way. I mean that in a good way. Well, no, I don't know, I think that is an interesting thing that like because like you said, and I've had this conversation with a lot of people, how like music like this, that you can bring an element to it that is like fun and kind of silly, and like Matt Sage and I have had this ongoing conversation about this, about how, you know, like joy and stuff are emotions too. Everyone thinks like, oh, you make this emotional music and everyone just goes to serious and melancholic. And it's like, no, but like being able to weave like joy and whimsy and silliness into music like this is, I don't know, it's like another level. It's like,
I totally agree. I mean, I think that's kind of like part of Lacuna and Parlor too, is like, I feel like for me, a lot of that is like pretty joyful, in this way, to contrast the intensity of Night of Fire. But yeah, it's always something that like I'm really looking for. It's like, I mean, I obviously love melancholy music too, but like I really like things when they're kind of interspersed together in this way. And I think that there's often like this attitude in a lot of like contemporary music of like trying to look like very stark and very serious.
Absolutely.
And I'm not that interested in it, because I'm like, it's not real. I'm like, man, don't you guys like, I sometimes feel like Homer in the football in the groin episode of The Simpsons a little bit, where I'm like, Barney's movie had heart, but football in the groin had football in the groin. And it's like, there's a part of me that's just like, yeah, like, don't you guys like just want to like laugh at something, or like do you not like experience this? Like, why are you trying to be like this, like present yourself in this like very austere, like self-serious way all the time? And I get that it's like such a like marketing thing, but it really like drives me crazy, because I'm like, you don't have to be like this, man. Like, you're just perpetuating a really like kind of stupid stereotype.
Yeah, well, and it's like in the year 2024, when like we're in climate collapse and like being whimsical, subversive.
So totally. I think that is an excellent point. Yeah, it's just like, and I think about that too. I'm like, man, like, yeah, it's rough out here, you know, like you might as well like have a little bit of fun and a little bit of enjoyment with everything.
Yeah. So, you know, well, this is why you were the like second person I asked to be on the show, because I knew it'd be this much fun. So
I knew it would be too. I'm sorry I was moving in a crisis the first time you asked me.
Yeah, how dare you, Mari, be in the middle of it?
Now I'm just moving and otherwise fine. Yeah,
which is its own crisis, because moving sucks, but
it does suck. Yeah,
but hey, at least it's like anyway, we don't need to go down that whole thing. Okay, so the Night of Fire, which is by the unpronounceable project between you and Seth Graham, is out August 30th on Orange Milk, and Lacuna and Parlor is out September 20th on Mondoy.
That's right.
And if you're listening to this podcast and you haven't listened to either of those albums, shame on you. You should do that. Hopefully they're both out. I don't know when this is coming out, but they'll be out soon if they're not.
Cool.
I'm shaming people, and it's my fault. So, but yeah, this is awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brad.
Once again, thank you to the one, the only, Mari Maurice. Go check out all her new stuff. I mean, she is the hardest working person in show business, as far as I'm concerned. Like I said, Night of Fire is out now. Orange Milk's great. Lacuna and Parlor, I can't get enough of this record. It is among my 2 or 3 favorite albums of 2023 so far. And that's saying something. There's been some killer music this year. So check out her playlist. Link is in the show notes. As ever, if you like the show and you want other people to hear the show, leave a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts, because that always helps. Got to fight the algorithms or whatever. You can take it to another level. Join the Patreon, patreon.com/Foxy Digitalis. For little as $3 a month, you get the episodes early. You get the full unedited conversation, because there's a whole extra section that's not on this main feed. And that ongoing support, it means the world, and it really, really helps the site continue. Thank you to everybody who has signed up. If that is not for you, take that money, though, and pick up Lacuna and Parlor or Night of Fire, or both, or any other thing that Mari's doing. Water Damage. We didn't even talk about Water Damage, who's arguably the best band in the world. Jesus. Anyway, that's it. Thank you all for listening. Keep on listening whatever the hell you want.